Now, this might sound a little cynical, but no matter how difficult you think it is to do business today, it is easier than it was 20 years ago. And
sure, but that's not a great benchmark.
It's not a great benchmark, but you see, the direction is right. So before I talk about the policy per se, I'll quickly touch upon 2 or 3 things, right? You mentioned about, you spoke about how a couple of these large startups, I mean, we call them startups because they're young, but they're very massively funded, and they're now moving to Singapore. Now, there is something of an exodus to Singapore, to the extent that many second and third round investors will insist in term sheets that you move to Singapore, at least the headquarters move to Singapore, if you are to receive their equity. Now, if I remember my numbers right, last year, well, it's already last year, in 15, over half, I think 56% of all funded startups moved to Singapore. The year before, or abroad, mostly Singapore. The year before, it was something like 3/4. My sense is, in my discussions with policymakers, that they're seized of this, and they're trying to address it. And they're doing it by changes in laws and how you can list easily and perhaps invigorate our junior market. Like London, the LSE has the AIM market, right? So that's one. And I think it's important to not lose sight of how we should not look at Startup India as an isolated policy. I think there is merit in seeing the 3 or 4 large programs, Make in India, Skill India, Digital India, and Startup India, as some sort of a largish animal, right? And this organism has 2 or 3 different parts. So Make in India, to my mind, is as much about ease of doing business in India as the World Bank measures it, which isn't, to my mind, entirely fair. But so you do business out of Mohali, right? Near Chandigarh. World Bank in most countries measures 1 city per country. India is large and diverse, so they measure 2, Delhi and Mumbai. So you are, completely left out of that study. So Make in India, I think, addresses that. Then employability, you said is a huge challenge, and it is. So skilling, right? And I think there are 2 or 3 things that the government possibly is attempting to do right. Now, in a time when we are trying to consolidate ministries, there is one new ministry formed, right? And to my mind, this is the only one. This is the Ministry for Skilling and Entrepreneurship. And I think what they really want to do is address the the challenge of creating employment at the rate of almost 1 million jobs a month. So it's 10 million a year for the next many years, right? And look, this might sound flippant, but I think the government has come to realize that the best ever jobs program is entrepreneurship. So instead of trying to create structured jobs in the government or around, let people create their own jobs by way of entrepreneurship, and they might do business with similar micro entrepreneurs and so on. And so now coming to your question, right? What is the government doing about this? So I think their heart is in the right place. Of last month or last fortnight, the big sort of launch, I think should be seen more as a statement of intent rather than a firm policy. I can't fault that statement of intent for much. The budget at the end of this month will probably tell us more, right? How much meat they want to put around the skeleton and so on. But I think that the start is promising. They have done some excellent things. So now you must understand these concepts like self-certification are nothing short of revolutionary for a country that has been through, one of our recent pieces of contemporary history can be classified as this Inspector Raj. Now, when they say that for startups...
Which he's still dealing with.
Sorry?
Which he's still dealing with.
So this policy has just come, right? So I think what they've now said is that as we define startups, you will not be visited by the feared inspector for the first, I think, 3 or so years of your existence. I know you're itching to do a rebuttal, but I'll just quickly finish this off, right?
They almost hit each other last night.
When we went over some of this.
Yeah, sorry.
Obviously, there were no Chatham House rules at the bar, so thank you for spilling the beans there. But then public procurement. So it's enormously difficult to try and supply to the government, even if you're a large company. So they've relaxed some of those procurement guidelines for startups, right? And I think it's now pertinent to mention that startups are not tech. Right?
Yeah.
I think that needs to be understood. So for the government, startups could be agri or health, social sector, education, and so on. And the policy, I think, pivots around the three very core areas of simplification, funding, and incubation. Now, you, of course, have more money than you can handle, and that's why you had to answer for, where this money is coming from. But simplification of laws, I think that's something to still grapple with, right? Which is important. And incubation. So a lot of these startups, if they don't have a little bit of a bubble inside of which they can operate, and I think the government has tried this to great effect. So I remember 10 or 20 years ago, the experiment with the software technology parks, STPI and so on, were excellent, excellent ideas when, these companies grew and then they went on to become, Infosys and, the large companies. So, very importantly, on funding, they've done away with the tax around fair market value. So now FMV is no longer, going to be viewed as, someone trying to do whatever, right? So I think that's incredible because when you're starting up, and honestly, even I don't understand how you value these companies at billions and so on. But the government has said, look, if you're a startup, we'll allow it. Very often, people might sell their own personal assets to start up. So those capital gains will again be exempt. So I think they're trying to do the right things. They might fail, but I'd like to remain, as you say, cautiously optimistic.
So step in the right direction. Do you want to say anything?
I think it's a misnomer. In detail, if you go self-certification, so I can counter every point, but I don't think we have time for that, and we should allow for other views. But self-certification is for acts or departments which don't matter to you, environment and some others.
Labor, that's a big one.
Income tax does. Income tax is still on your door all the time. And 3 years later, they can open the first 3 years files too. Okay, so it's not that they've gone away. MAT, minimum alternate tax, applies for the first 3 years. I don't know which startups make money in the first 3 years, by the way, so tax benefits are no. Singapore, UK, US, even Chile, South America, they have such great startup policies, which I've studied. It's not too hard for government to make real ones rather than just show something for the sake of it and make a big fuss about it. That's my problem with what they've done. They just announced it, it would have been okay. They've made such a big fuss on it, big PR, big media campaigns, and on ground, it's nothing. I've invested in startups, I'm running a few, and I don't see any value to me, personally. Okay, I don't see any value. And I'm not saying everything is wrong. In time, I hope they get their act together. I sincerely hope that, but everything he said, it's what it says on the paper, but you read underneath how it helps any entrepreneur. I don't think it does. And my point is this, why do we do like FMV, taxation kind of things only for startups? Why for first 3 years? I don't understand. Why could it not be for all businesses? People who started this year, are they worse off because, they couldn't wait after the act came into picture? So there are lots and lots of things which are
So it's a step in the right direction, but not meaningful enough.
Yeah. It's,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So The Economist had a story last month which said that in the world right now, there are 1.8 billion people between the ages of 15 and 30. And a large chunk of them, just by the nature of our country, will be in India. They need jobs. Companies, entrepreneurs are a great way to get jobs. But for that, to even get to anywhere close to that, we need scale. All of you are entrepreneurs, all of you invest in companies. Where do you think we are in terms of scale in building companies? Is it just about burning cash, or are we actually building businesses of scale? And Prasad and Ashish, please.
So take this one. I think principally, if you don't go by the book and the policy, right? And most change is measured whether directionally you have a positive direction towards actually taking the first step and going into entrepreneurship. Today, if it's a middle-class family, and if the children are going to pass out of university, startup is an option. And I'm very energized from that fact that behaviorally we are moving in that direction, right? I mean, you're trying to take the risk, which was the biggest problem that Indian entrepreneurs had, because we've almost like grown up in controlled environments, and risk-taking ability articulation of the problem and your idea and scalability is a problem. So risk-taking has started. Articulation is still a problem, right? People pitch and they keep pitching a lot of ideas, but they cannot be articulated very well, right? Then scalability. So what do we do when investors give us a lot of money? We try to burn them on customer acquisition, right? Instead of building processes, instead of actually going in a stepwise manner to establish a concept before you actually start taking into multiple cities or multiple geographies, right? I think that is so critical. I understand that scale and speed are very, very important, but they have to be built on certain process parameters. I mean, Ashish keeps, I think the whole day he talked about entrepreneurs that have gone through 2-3 cycles, right? We don't have that opportunity because we just started late on the startups ecosystem. But even if you started late, nobody talks about failures when they come into a meeting. They only talk about how good is their startup. And guess what? Every time I ask this question, do you have competition? They say, no, we don't have competition. Oh, yeah, damn you do, right? And a lot of them actually do different pitches to different investors, and the community is very small. Right? So I think there are some basic behavioral aspects that will differentiate our success versus the success factors that most of the startup hubs have around the world. And we will get there. I have no...
but currently it sounds like you're saying in a good way or in a bad way.
Currently I'm saying that there is an improvement that is required from a behavioral aspect in articulation, in scalability, right? The risk people are taking. I mean, you can see it. Most of half of the funding that happened in India and also actually the US is non-VC money. 50% is non-VC money in 2015, which means people are taking out money and signing checks because they're seeing all this positive vibe that's going on, right? But to be able to support that, you need to have these behavioral skills that need to actually go through.
But how will that happen?
I feel the ecosystem has to generate that. And you go to a valley and do a startup because there is an ecosystem there, right? Why don't you go to South Carolina and do something, right? You'll come back to the valley because there is an ecosystem to learn, to fail fast, the resources are available, and to do it. And you need to create that ecosystem. So when I go to different parts of India and look at accelerators and incubators, most of them are focused around creating entrepreneurs in that city. That shouldn't be the problem. That shouldn't be the issue, right? The issue should be that, hey, how do I get the best of talent from different parts of the world into this center? And that's what Malaysia is doing. I mean, I recently had an opportunity to go to the demo day that Magic, which is the Malaysian government incubator, did. Fantastic startups. A startup from Czechoslovakia is presenting there. A startup from the US is presenting there. And that's what they're bringing. They're building that ecosystem of global talent into incubators and accelerators.
So what needs to happen for India to get that?
I think principally...
Are we on the way to getting that?
Absolutely on the way to getting that. I think there are a lot more international accelerators and incubators coming into India, setting up bases, bringing startups into different locations where the ecosystem is there so that they get exposed to all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And they get more confident about how they're presenting. Right. So I think there is the right direction. We're going in the right direction. It's just that we need to ensure where we need to upskill rather than focusing on the wrong things.
On skill, Ashish, you've set up more than one company in India, but you bring your people from the US. Why?
Sometimes, but we'll get to that. I'm sure very many of you are bored, have become the fixture on the stage.
Yes, I'm sure you've not seen Ashish all day today.
There are 5 chairs here. I've occupied 3 of them. I still have to occupy the remaining 2. So just to let you know how much more you'll see of me. Look, as I get older, I used to think there were 2 kinds of people in the world. People who saw the glass as half full and people who saw the glass as half empty. Now at my age, I'm just really glad I have a glass. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, why are we here? Why are we in India? There must be some opportunity, something we are seeing, right? He should be in London if he doesn't like it so much. This guy should be sitting in New York. I should be sitting in Boston. Yeah? We are here because we are seeing opportunity. There's a glass. All right? Let's be very clear about it. Is the cost of business higher here or lower here? Who cares? You're here because you're seeing opportunity. End of debate. Let's now move on to why are we seeing the opportunity? What's exciting? Is it because it's a low-cost resource base for me that I can use to build something overseas that cost me 25 million and build it for 2? Or is it because I'm seeing $1 billion opportunity in India's market? And that is the defining question today. If you are seeing your $1 billion opportunity in today's market in India, that is why you are here. It is no longer you coming here because you have a cheaper access to resources. I'll give you an analogy. This is going to Prasad's point, right? Everyone, I remember when I first became a venture capitalist in 1994, this ages me now. You know, one of the first things when people articulated, we used to be the same problem in the US. What's your competition? We have none. So I used to always give them the analogy. Go to the turn of the 19th century. People used to go out to sea, cut icebergs. The only thing they used to figure out is how do you get a better saw? Someone then figured out, you know what, at the harbor I can put up an ice-making facility and I can transport ice to where it's needed. Someone else came around and said, oh, you know what, I can build a refrigerator. Now, everyone solved the same problem. They're all there to preserve your food. None of the leaders in any one of the businesses I've mentioned ever graduated to the other business because they were only seeing what they did. So when you analyze competition, you need to analyze competition as what's the problem they're solving. I can go from point A to point B on a bicycle, on foot, in a car, Uber, train, right? They all get me from point A to point B. It's a transportation problem. But why am I even getting into transportation? Is it because I'm going to buy groceries so someone else can deliver it to my house? They solve the problem, right? So I think the core issue here is how do we get people to recognize everyone's an entrepreneur in India. Everyone, by and large. Your driver's an entrepreneur. You know, the guy selling 2 balloons on the side of the road is an entrepreneur. There's something in the genes there. They're subscale entrepreneurs. You essentially are just trying to say, let's become scale entrepreneurs. There's an opportunity in the country, let's scale it. Now the question that's going to face this country, which is what I keep coming back to, because I want to publicize my book, and if people allow me, I'll actually read you abstracts. But
No.
there are only 2 things I want to do right now in my life. Show you photographs of my children, and
They're
read
very
you
cute.
abstracts from my book.
No.
No, but the question is going to be, do you want to create 100 Carlos Slims or Mukesh Ambanis, or do you want to create millions and millions of people who are worth $100,000, right? And that is going to be the central question that's going to face this nation as we move forward.
Speaking of $1 billion opportunity, and this is for you. You want to say something?
Yeah, it was so related to what the two
Yeah.
gents said. So, and this is sort of tied to the theme of this session, which is, sounds very declarative, right? Unleashing 1 billion entrepreneurs. But I think there is a grain of truth in this. I think it's a tectonic shift that for the first time, people are really viewing entrepreneurship as a completely plausible, valid career option, right? So I do a bit of teaching at one of our better management schools, right, SRCC, and I see most of the kids in class really have never had an entrepreneur in the family. So, you can take the view that you need to be an entrepreneur to survive in India. So if someone's father is a farmer or a small shopkeeper, but, in the more sophisticated sense of entrepreneurship that we understand. And now there's a willingness to say, okay, let's do it. And I think this is a generational shift. So if you looked at my father's time, I think the number one, the most aspirational profession was the civil services, right? So IFS, OIS, IAS, and so on. And in his father's time, it was possibly defense, the armed services. And so by the time I sort of graduated, it was changing. But now the kids say that, look, I want to be an entrepreneur, or I want to do something very, very commercial. So either I'll join a multinational, and now they have the audacity or the aspiration to be at the very top. So look at Indira Nui or Satya Nadella and so many more, and so look, that's where I think I could be. Or they say, you know, I want to start the next, I don't know, Flipkart, or, you know, so that is very much the aspiration. And I think that's a significant tectonic shift, really. So that's one. Oh, quick story. The founder of Just Dial, which is one of these unicorns, right? So he said publicly recently, he said, you know, I'm a Tamil Brahmin, and in my family, I'm pretty sure there hasn't been an entrepreneur in like 500 years or something. So just imagine, you know, where these people are coming from. And that's, I think, fairly universal across the country. The second is that, you know, you said something about ecosystems, Prasad. So ecosystems are, of course, you know, absolutely fundamental to making this work. And only so much can be done top-down, which is government and support and infrastructure with this hard soft infra. I think a lot of it is really just culture, right? We still, I think, you know, for all of our, you know, softness and, you know, spirituality, I think we are still very unforgiving of entrepreneurs. There's not much of second chances, right? So
And that's important for success.
Yeah.
that is, I think, absolutely essential, because if you look at the unicorns and the Valley startups and entrepreneurs, a lot of these overnight successes have come after 2 or 3 very, you know, hard
Painful.
failures. So am I right? Aren't you more likely in the Valley to be funded if you've had 3 or 4 failures?
Start
than-
with the failure.
Than
you
like
probably
me
get-
to go and say I have an unblemished record, you know, I don't know, we'll wait for you to fail then fund you. So sorry, there's just a couple of
Yeah.
points. ahead.
No, but to your point, and something you mentioned as well, the billion-dollar opportunity and creating the next Flipkart or whatever. So in terms of the next set of entrepreneurs, are people only interested in building the next Flipkart? You know, basically companies that cater to the urban middle class, upper middle class existence, or is there any interest and room for the bottom of the pyramid, which is truly a billion-dollar opportunity? I mean, do people look at it like that or not?
So I think we've had the bottom for a long time, where, you know, we almost, till the 90s or early 2000s, we almost didn't allow ourselves to dream very big. So it was very much a virtue to be modest, not only in your lifestyle, but also in your aspirations and dreams. I think now there is very much a confidence, and I use this word deliberately, audacity almost, to take on the best in the world and win. I think this is significant, and I think that's important. We still have a lot of people who say, look, you know, I just want to solve the problem around my village or district, which is, I don't know, 200 villages even, right? And so we do some work around villages and so on as well. So that always will remain. But I think it's also important, I think not just for this brand of India and so on, but I think it's just important for the morale of these, I don't know, 600 or 700 million sub-35 kids to have the hope that, look, they can create corporations that employ tens of thousands of people in scores of countries, and, you know, I think that's also needed.
That's a valid point, but do you think in the process we're missing out on another opportunity and a big part of the country?
I don't think so at all. I honestly don't, because I think we are just so diverse. I think in a very homogeneous society or a country that perhaps could have been, you know, maybe even a factor. I don't think even this policy or any dream, the Indian dream or whatever you want to call it, will appeal to everybody, right? So there are people who say, look, we want to concentrate on tech-based startups. There are those who want to say, look, I want to continue doing what my forebears did. So I don't know, it could be carpentry, whatever. But I might use tech to take it, you know, to other
Sell it
geographies
online.
or sell online, let's say. Or, you know, so I think a lot of that will still continue and drive efficiency, right? I think that's
Prasad?
my hope. Yeah.
You know, I think a lot has been said, so I don't want to waste a lot of time. But basically, I think one principal, you know, shift that's happening is that the adoption rate is very high, right? In terms of, right now we are 300 million internet users. I believe we have surpassed the United States, but we're still at 19% internet penetration, right? But even with that kind of population, I think the adaptability is very, very high in terms of trying to do new things, right? But going back about creating ecosystems, I've talked about an ecosystem creation in the entrepreneurial world after you finish university. What about ecosystems creation while you're actually studying? And that, to me, is also missing, right? It started, but it's nowhere close to what the United States has. Can anyone take a guess how much grant that Stanford University gets every year? Anyone? Take a number.
It can't be $1 billion.
Okay, another number.
2 billion.
Sorry, 2 billion? $58 billion was received by Stanford last year.
Wow.
Yeah, and and this doesn't include patents and real estate, which is worth a lot. But you know, the amount of funding, and MIT and Harvard received about $128 million, right? The amount of funding and the ecosystem creation happens right at the start, right? They did this project called the incubator, which basically was a blanket that can keep babies alive for the next 2-3 days instead of actually putting the baby in an incubator. It received $10 million funding just on the idea. And then the three people from different disciplines who came together and created it. And today it's impacting the whole world, right? So I think there's seed money, but seed money is so small, you can't do anything with that, right? I think there has to be a lot more support ecosystem creation there and an ecosystem creation here. And when I say an ecosystem creation here, after when you're an entrepreneur and when you're actually scaling the business, you're in the hyper-growth mode, and then they need a lot of help there. I quit my job, nicely paid job, last year to do this. And guess what? I quit my job, I have no salary now, but I'm also investing. So my wife thought I'm mad. She said, what's wrong with you? But because I believe in the system. I believe that there is, as Ashish said, we're all here for it because we have an opportunity, we want to make some money. It's as simple as that. Forget all the rule books by the table. We think there's an opportunity and we want to make money, right? And that's why we're investing. But we need to create that ecosystem.
I'll make one comment to what Meg has said. When we make an investment, what do? We invest in one thing. There's always an opportunity. We invest in people. That's it. So why do we find our teams in the United States? So I'll give you an example. There's 3 businesses in India that we've invested in. There's Rohan's business called Stranded, where we are building Uber for emergency services out of India. It's cheaper to do it here, but more importantly, there is no AAA here. There's no AAA in China. It is the opportunity of the world, is these 2 countries. These 2 countries dwarf the automobiles that are in the United States, right? It's a bigger market. So that's why we are here. Why is the team being brought from the US here? Simple reason, Prasad said it. They have a better ability to articulate than we find in Indian entrepreneurs. That's it. Second business, co-founder of a company called PropTiger. Does brokerage to information to in real estate, right? When it started, it was called iTrust. It was trying to disintermediate financial instruments, credit cards, mortgages, etc. It's a bit too early. Wore its badge of failure like a badge of honor and reinvented itself. It's part of the, now News Corp invested $35 million, it's supposed to be doing well, but it's redefining how someone buys a home in India, right? It's a unique model. It's not like Realtor.com, it's not an information sharing website, it is end-to-end life cycle. But again, the gentleman who runs it, with whom we created it, went to HBS, worked in the US, is able to articulate that idea better, so we can articulate it to a strategic partner like News Corp better, because they have 34% of their global business is real estate, that most people don't realize this as a media company. We invested in Prasad's accelerator in India. Again, he's able to articulate, but our point is, look, we think there's opportunity in India, there'll be the future generation in India, but we would rather play it indirectly, right? We would like to see the deals. He's involved in Springboard 91, Startups 500, his own business. He sees pretty much every deal. We get to see the deals, right? The way we invest is we take a market segment that we want. We then try and find a team that we like. We tend to, and maybe we find the teams in the US is because we live there. It could just be one of those, self-defining moments, right? Because where you live is who you know, is where you've done business, that's where you find the teams.
I think we're running, you want,
Just one additional comment I want to make. It's slightly tangential to the, how so many startups are doing and how they execute and how you select them. I think one other point which is important to keep in mind is also, we've all said we need millions and billions of startups or they're going to happen eventually or they're already happening. I think one important theme which I believe we're missing out is what do the startups do? What do they end up doing? We all know they solve problems, right? So say 10 years ago, you needed a cab. You could call the hotel guy, reception, he would call a cab and it'll take you an hour and it'll cost you twice or thrice the money, but you'll get a cab, right? Today with Uber, Ola, you can just swipe and it's there, it's much cheaper, shared rides are available. I'm sure somebody in the world is solving the problem, which is that you walk out and the cab is there. You just think or it happens before you need it. But is that a real problem we face today? I think my one other point I'm really passionate about is, what are the problems we are solving? Are they really the big problems we face as a human society? Is climate change not a bigger problem? Is the social inequality we all talk about 300 million internet users in India, probably 1 to 2 billion smartphone users on the planet, but what about the other 5 billion? There's a big unrest that those 5 billion nobody's focusing on, and these 2 billion everybody is trying to get on their app for messaging, for cabs, for ordering foods, for giving them whatever, getting them, I think, I don't know if you guys have heard of a person named Manoj Bhargav, who's he invented a 4-hour, 5-hour energy drink in US, $4 billion guy. What he's focusing on are real problems in my mind, which is he's trying to get clean water to poor people. He's making a process, a technology, machine-driven process through which people can have access to clean water. Poor people do not need, they don't need wines delivered from France to their home. They don't need food delivered. They just need clean water, air, food, sanitation, healthcare, education. Basic things you get them. We will
that's
be
a big
raising
business
them.
opportunity for the right people.
This is an opportunity for the right people. So I think I just want to leave everyone at least with that thought, and that's where I'm doing one of the next things, but I want to just leave everyone with that thought that, let's start not just focus on valuations, start focus on value creation. Let's not do what we all can, let's do what we should. And by adding little value like many of us have done in the past, in many people's life, we can scale quickly. In 5-10 years, we can get good exits and make money for us, for our investors. But let's actually, 90% we're going to fail. Let's face it, we all know that. 90-95%, whatever opportunity we pick, even if it's the easiest, we're going to fail. Might as well fail at something which is truly life-changing, and it may be much harder. It
But
may take 10 to 20 years.
as we agreed, failure leads to success.